down the sides of the frames, which is there's a sheet in the manual showing locations of the points that the foam formers have to go. Next, with the foam formers cut out in a rough cut, not cleaned up or anything like that, just rough cut, you place each foam former. This is the fin number 3. We place it in position on the marks. Then with a felt pen, we mark the angle and the depth at the leading edge of the foam, so that you bring the foam into location. You mark where the back of the tube would be, how deep, and what the angle would be for that tube passing through there. You do that to the leading edge only. Now these tubes are 1-inch tubes, so we use a 1-inch hole saw, and we have an angle mark and a depth mark. So we start the hole saw in the foam, place it on the angle, and cut through the foam on the angle. Next, with the Stanley knife, we can cut the excess off so that we have a half U shape in the foam, and that's been cut on an angle. We also make up sticks with sandpaper on, and if we place that in there, you can see the angle there that foam's been cut through on, and we can sand it to get a nice clean hole, and also to bring the angle that we've marked to the correct angle. Okay, next stage, after we've cut the front of the foam former out on the correct angle, we place, this one is a V3 or fin 3, that's on the vertical stabiliser. We place it in the position it would normally go, align it with the marks front and rear, and then mark how deep the rear tube will be on it and what the total length required, and also the angle of the tube on the trailing edge. So we've marked an angle on it, a depth on it, and a total limit. Then we take the foam former up. We do have marks there and an angle mark, and we use the 1-inch hole saw again, and I sight it to the marks. Cut the hole, and we're left with a bit excess, so I just cut that off. A Stanley knife is easy, or you can use scissors. Now with the holes in both ends, we place it back in position, and we check how tight the fit is. Now we always make them a little bit too big to fit in, and when we push them into position, it actually pushes the frame out of shape, so we've got to be careful of the distance on the spigot here. So next we just use the sanding stick, and we sand them down, paying attention to the angle that they've got to be sanded at. And keep checking on the frame the distance. Also checking very carefully. It always pays to do the centre rib first, and this rib is the lower rib, but it's very close to the centre, and make sure that it doesn't push the frame out of shape. So we push it up, and we see if it's possible to compress the foam former to keep the trailing edge straight. This one's still a little bit tight, so we shape it down a bit further. Aligning it, checking the compression, and when we compress it, the rib bows a little bit so we can actually push it straight. Now, this rib is to size, but it's not shaped out on the sides yet. So that's stage one. We make all the ribs to their correct distances, and making sure that they're fractionally larger, so that by the time you put a tape on to put them in position, you're allowing for the pullback on the tape. So if you make them too short, your trailing edges will be all bowed inwards, and you want to avoid that. So the next stage now, if all the foam pieces are done, is to actually shape them and get them looking very symmetrical. So that's the next stage. Okay, next stage is to shape the formers, and when they're rough cut out with the jigsaw, there may be thick sections and thin sections, and they're not perfectly symmetrical. So you can use a belt sander, or you can use a linisher, or you could hand sand them if you had to, or you can use a disc sander on the end of a drill. We've got a linisher here, so I'll just show you how you shape them up. Now when the former is true to shape and looks symmetrical both ways, if you're unsure, draw it on a piece of paper, flip it over, check it to make sure that it is a symmetrical airfoil, not more curve on one side than the other. If it is any of the foam formers that have equal ones on each side, such as a H1, E, the elevators, you can get the two formers close, then put one on top of the other and pin them with a rivet through the foam, and then do the final shaping with the two so that they become a matched pair. Two E2s, two E3s, two H1s, and make sure that you don't go too thin on the back edges, otherwise there's no meat for the foam to hang on, and it can just push straight off the back of the leading edge or trailing edge. So you must leave a little bit there, and that can be crushed up later with your fingers. So if it's a little bit thick, you can try crushing it with your fingers. So we've got them to size there now, and the next stage is fitting them off and taping them in position. Okay, we've got the foam former shaped up, ready to go. They've been done correct to length. The next stage is, once we've got all the formers ready, we usually put the one that's closest to the centre of each frame so that we don't push the frame out of position. This one's close enough, and I've just got to pay attention to that position there. So on the slopey ones, the foam wants to push out of the way of the mark, and normally the mark, I have the mark on this side and there's a mark on that side. We get the filament tape, which is supplied, and you keep it in alignment with the side of the foam. Stuck it there, and hold my foot to keep it square. We line up with the rear mark, and when we pull the tape tight, the foam former can go out of shape, so we may need to push it over a little bit, then pin the tape down there. And we've got to check if we've got it compressed enough there. On some of the frames the tape will go around square. If it doesn't go around square, you don't want to make horrible wrinkles, so cut it off about 50 mils past, and then start a retape square to the foam former, allow 50 mils for the wrap on the other side. Then hold the foam tight, straight, pin it in the centre, pull your tape up, go around nice and straight, cut off approximately 50 mil. Try not to have wraps coming around on the back, on the top side that are wrinkly. All these have to be taped twice, so you've got to do 2 wraps around. Remember, keeping the foam former straight. Bedding it down by pushing the tape to make sure it's sticking to the foam, because it doesn't stick to the foam very readily. Cutting it off. Okay, she's had a double wrap around there with the foam. Next thing is, illustrated on the diagram for the foam formers, you've got to do a wrap to stop the tape rolling off the foam. So we do it very close to the leading edge. We go around, it may go offline. The main thing is that it sits flat and sits smooth, so that there's no bumps and protrusions. So we've got 1 wrap there, 1 wrap in the centre, and it always pays to make sure the tape comes back onto itself, because it doesn't hold very well on the foam. And with all these wraps here that have gone over the 50 mils to stop them lifting back at the front or at the rear, that's one of the reasons for doing this second wrap here, to lock all those ends off so that they don't peel off when we're fitting the sailcloth. Also, if the tape rolls off, then the foam former can fall out, and we don't want that happening. Okay, make sure it's all bedded down. Now the foam former's in position. It's taped in 3 positions. It has a double wrap around it, and you can sight down the trailing edge, and if you've made the former too big, then you'll have a bow in the trailing edge, and you don't want to have any bows. If you make them too small, then you'll have a downwards bow, and you don't want that either. So when you do your first wrap, inspect it after the first wrap, because if it's wrong, you can take the tape off and redo it. That's the end of that procedure. Okay, next stage after all the foam formers are in position and taped up correctly is to use 25mm masking tape, and any areas where the fabric's going to rub, such as on the rivet heads and on the gussets, they need to be taped. So on the ends of all these frames, you can run 1 wrap around, then push all air pockets out of the tape, and 1 wrap around the other way. Now the tape is positioned so as to just cover the sharp edge and to cover the rivet heads. As for the sides of the gusset plates here, use a narrower tape, probably 20mm masking tape, and run the tape down just over the edge by about 4mm there, and then just wrap it in underneath. You don't want to come around this edge too much. You don't want to close the whole metal part off with tape. It becomes very messy. It's not very neat. So along the rivet heads, just over the edge of the plate. You don't need to tape across there, but you do need to tape the end. You do not need to tape around the back side of the gusset, only along the edges here, and then wrap the tape back. Now that one is finished. So around there, moving down to some of the other ones, using 25mm on this one, we've got a bit of an edge there. It's easy to do the wrap this way. Make sure the tape cannot lift. Don't need to cover all that area there, as long as the rivet head's covered. That's the main thing. Don't need to cover here because the fabric won't ever touch that point of the gusset. Down on the ends, you mustn't tape up over any of the holes. There's 2 holes down here, so you mustn't cover up the holes. You can cover up on the square edges, you can just cover the edge, but only by 4mm and wrap inside. Don't cover the whole edge because we need the edge for putting the double-sided tape to stick the fabric down. On the main gussets down here, once again, just place the tape over so it covers the rivet head and covers the edge. Don't cover up the whole of the round tube because we do glue at those points. We're only trying to cover the rivet heads and the edge of the gusset. This is a fin and a vertical stabiliser, and it's the only frame that you need to put a little segment of plastic, which I'll supply, about 3mm thick. Has to fit in this edge here because when the fabric goes on it, it actually closes the edge up, and later on it makes it difficult to fit because the fabric gets too tight. So we put that in there and we remove it after the fabric's fitted so that it keeps that spacing. So just tape on all the gussets. Don't use too much tape because you will need to glue down here, down there, across here. And the double-sided tape won't stick very well to the masking tape. It will stick, but not as good as directly to the metal. So that's the next stage. Just using masking tape, or you can use the filament tape, but masking tape actually beds down better than the filament tape for that job. Okay, next stage now, after the formers are fitted, everything taped in position and the masking tape on the ends, is we put double-sided tape for the fabric security. And we don't run the tape around the ends, we only run it from in line with the tube. One run in 1/2 inch on the end of the tube, stopping it approximately on line with the tube. Make sure it's pushed down well. And on the end, we run 2 layers. On the end, because this is 12mm wide, this tape, and the end is 25mm wide, so hence 2 layers does it neatly. And on the other side, up at the start of the tube once again, on the edge, make sure it's all bedded down, and we leave the backing strip on the double-sided tape at this point. Next thing is to put the sailcloth on to the frame. We usually do this on a carpeted floor. Whatever you do, don't do it on concrete because you'll like it to put a hole in the sail. And you just carefully edge the cloth down on the frame. You can rest it against your knee and pull on the cloth. Working it along bit by bit, and you get to a stage where you can't pull physically any further on the cloth. Putting the knee against it once again, levering fingers, pulling on the cloth, getting as many wrinkles out as possible. Now when you look at the end of the cloth up here, this has to be very, very tight, and the stitching has to be actually pulled slightly if you've got the correct tension. At the moment I can grab the cloth and pull up around about 8mm of looseness, so that means that I've still got to pull it down a fair way. Physically I can't pull it just by yanking on it, it's a bit difficult, and the cloth is very slippery, your hands tend to slide, so to get a good grip on the cloth, just use water. You can have a little spray or a little container of water. Just wet the two hands. Then you can place the tail against your body and try and work the edge of the cloth down, working all the wrinkles, keeping even. Once you've got a few wrinkles down, you can pull them tight as far as you can against your knee. Then you won't get any further once again. Check the end, see how much looseness is there. There's still another 3mm on the end. So once again, with our wet hands, we get a grip on each side. You can start up here if you like, and we bash the frame very carefully, hitting both edges at the same time so that we don't bend the frame in any way. And we just bash the frame down, and that tends to pull it tight, and then we move down further, and it starts to sound like a drum when you're getting it. So I've got the cloth down about another 5mm now, and there's wrinkles here. I pull those wrinkles out, starting to sound like a drum. But it can still go down further, and sometimes you have to spend half an hour on each of these. The stitching is starting to get opened up and pulled, so there is no looseness in the top, but I can still stretch it a bit more. The more I stretch it on the end, the tighter the fabric will be in the bays here. And the tighter you get it, the better the job. So the hands tend to dry out all the time, so you have to keep wetting them. Only need a slight dampness to them. Okay. Now the cloth is looking quite tight, and there are no wrinkles down it, but it can probably go a little bit further. You usually see a mark, and where the stitching is doubled up, that should be on the end of the tube. If you've got the tension about correct, you should have it at that point. And the way to get it a bit further is to use vice grips very carefully on the ends, and that's the next procedure. Next stage, with the fabric as tight as you can get it, beating it down and everything, we usually have 3 pairs of vice grips. You don't have to, but you can get away with 2. You need some long jaw vice grips. They're the best. If you use wider jaws, it actually bends the round tube flat, and you don't want to do that. And 1 normal standard large pair of vice grips. We get on the end of the fabric, and we get some old fabric and place it over the other fabric to protect it. We get the vice grips right on the stitch line, bend the fabric over itself, and then grip onto the vice grips, not so tight and that it'll actually break the fabric, but tight enough that it can't slip. And we put masking tape around all the jaws of the vice grips. So we've got it on the vice grips there, then I turn them sideways and I use them as a lever against the back end. Now with someone holding the frame on the end so that it doesn't lift up, but it still allows the fabric to move, we lever as hard as we can, and we look and see if we're making an impression on the seam, and it gets quite drummy. And whilst it's under tension, because it wants to slip back very easily, we use a pair of scissors or a Stanley knife, and we slice a hole in the fabric on the edge of the stitch line, still holding the tension so it doesn't slide back. We slide a pair of long jaw vice grips inside the tube and clamp it down so that the fabric can't slide back, and then I can let the tension off on that section there. Now that's the trailing edge done on this one. We're turning it over to do the leading edge, and if I lever it down it will bend these pliers out of the way, so we need to rest the tail up on a piece of timber or just something to rise it off the ground a small amount. Once again, fabric over the upper fabric, vice grips on, turn them sideways, then use them as a lever on the end of the tube. Try not to lever right in the centre of the tube at the back on the flat ones, because it can distort the flat C-channel. So just be careful to lever on the vertical edge so that you're not distorting the tube. Now you hang on to it, you lever as hard as you can. You make sure that you are actually pulling the stitch and it's coming down tight. You get to a stage where it won't go any further. If you go too far it might split the fabric just on the end, but that won't matter. It'll only split past the end of the tube anyway. Once it starts to split, you really have to fit the fabric off at that point, because you won't be able to pull on it anymore, because you won't get any tension. So we cut just a slot just in the very end and place a pair of long jaw vice grips in there, and that holds the fabric on line. Now with a normal pair of scissors we can scissor cut the end. You can have a look at the frame and determine what actual fabric is going to touch the frame and what's not. So we're just cutting here so that we end up with two flaps. Now we orientate the covers. The horizontal stabilisers and the fin have the hooks on the Velcro, and the elevator and the rudder have the felt, which is a lot softer. And with the horizontal stabilisers, this one will become the right one, so that the Velcro is pointing down so it doesn't look messy. So the airflow is coming over and just floating along, and the elevator is underneath. So this one orientates itself as being the right one, and the other cover will automatically become the left one. There is no right and left frame when you start. They're both identical. Same with the elevators, they're both identical. Now if this is going to be the right one, then we don't want to finish all of our fabric work with the seam to the top, because it'll look messy. So the first fold will be from the lower side going towards the top. And once again, you might have to do two cuts here, one on each side, whatever makes the fabric fold neatly. Now with the scissors, we peel the back off the double-sided tape. Double-sided tape backing coming off there. We take it off the next layer as well, remembering that we've got 4 layers here. You don't take it off all the layers, because then it gets too sticky, and when you're pulling it with your fingers, you can get stuck to your fingers. Now, we always pull in the centre of any panel to try and move any wrinkles out. And the way I do it is I just use my thumbs as a lever, grab the fabric and pull as tight as possible, pushing on the frame, then push it down just in one small area. You can have someone standing there that actually pushes it down. So that area there, for 100 mils, is glued. And then there's still wrinkles in this area, and probably wrinkles in this area. It's not glued along this area yet, so we can actually pull it off any glue if it is on, tension the fabric up, then push it onto the glue, and there's no wrinkles. If you make a mistake, just pull it off the glue again and start again. You don't have to re-glue, you just break it away. So down here we pull it as tight as we can, and whilst it's tight, make sure it sticks, really bed it in. Now this flap here will go around the end of the tube. We take the next layer of seam stick off, and we still hold it tight, and we just work it over the end, pulling down and sticking in. So looking at the end of it, we've stuck it there, we've stuck it on the end, and always make sure it's really pushed down well, because it can slide a little bit under tension off the double-side tape. Now we turn her over, and this was our top side, which we haven't done yet, the flap at the top side. We've still got the flap from the bottom side and this excess fabric here, and we've got one more layer of double-sided tape. Get out of the way. Now, if there's excessive amount of cloth, you can just peel it off, and you don't have to be super neat about it. And then you push that last edge onto the double-sided tape. So looking at it on the inside, that's around glued, up glued, and glued inside there. Now we have to glue the next surface, and to do that we have to move it out of the way slightly. If you're working on your own, then you can use a bit of masking tape. Just stick it and hold it out of the way. And we get our double-sided tape, and we lift the fabric up slightly. We run the same 4 layers as we did before. Make sure it's bedded down. That's why we only start it from the edge of the tube. You can't get right out too far because the fabric tension's too tight to get the tape in there. So one layer down on that there, another layer up there, now we've taped 3 layers here, 1 layer on the top surface, this being the right hand side, and 2 layers on the end, but we haven't put another layer underneath. This is the C-channel one, because we actually finished the fabric on that joint there, which won't be seen because it will be to the lower side. So the next one, same as before, grab the frame in the centre, pull as tight as possible. First thing I must do is pull the tape off. So we pull in the centre. If we're happy with the tension, we pull it down and lock it off in the centre. We're left with wrinkles on each side. We lift the fabric off any glue, pull as tight as we can, and then stick it down. If we're unhappy with how the corners worked out, or any of it's worked out, we pull it off the glue, we pull it up again and stick it down. You can use the back side of the scissors to actually make sure that the fabric is getting impregnated by the glue and sticking well. Excess fabric here on the end, so I'm just doing an uppercut just up to the edge of the tube. Peeling off the next 2 layers of double-sided tape. Pulling it down. stuck down. This one here being the last finished edge. Just rub something soft, make sure it's well and truly set off. If it isn't, pull it off and do it again. Now we're left with a flap of material. We can let the scissors off at this point, the vice grips, and the tension should hold on the sticky. We carefully have a sharp pair of scissors, just peel off the excess fabric, and then the end is stuck. Okay, further to the last stage of taping up the seam stick. This is the fin, vertical stabiliser. We put one run of tape down on the edge of the C-section. We put 2 runs of seam stick on the gusset on the corner, and we do that to every service. On the very end we do 2 runs. Once again, 2 on the gusset there. There is no tape up on the corner here on the fin. With the rudder, now with the rudder and the elevator, they have a round end on the end of the frames. You put 1 run of seam stick down the side and 1 extra run alongside it on the gusset, same as on the fin. 2 runs down the base, 1 more run on the side with 2 on the gusset. And the tape on the rudder and the elevators must run right to the end of the 1/2-inch tube. Don't stop it short, make sure it runs right to the end, because you need the glue there for keeping the fabric down right on the corner. Now this elevator here has been covered on and closed off on one side. The bottom side has been closed off. We've re-taped. We don't normally tape right around on the back edge here. You can if you like, but normally I finish it just on the edge of the gusset. So that gives you 2 runs of tape there, 1 run of tape on the inner edge. Then this will be pulled tight around there, stuck down, and then we'll cut the excess fabric off. And holding the tension on that, you probably need someone to hold on to the frame on the very end, and then you just pull the fabric up as tight as you possibly can, and someone pushes it down for you, because it's very difficult to pull it and stick it on at the same time. It can be done, but it's hard. Okay, next stage after all the tails are covered is to cut the excess fabric off, and you can heat up a knife blade. I'm using a cutting knife. It pays to burn the fabric. If you just cut it with a Stanley knife, it can fray a little bit. So I'm just cutting out the excess on the gap seal. You need to do that on the fin and on the rudder. The other gap seals should be about the right length, but on the fin and the rudder there is a piece where there's no Velcro sewn. You could leave it as a flap, but it's better if you remove it. You'll find it gets in the way of the elevator horn, so we just remove that section off the fin and the rudder, and take off the excess to expose the mount hole on the fin, and best to burn it out once again so that it seals the fabric after it's done. So that exposes the mount hole for the fin. And now the next procedure will be the riveting hinges. But first thing we have to do is locate all the positions on the trailing edge where the hinge holes are. That'll be the next procedure. So next procedure, finding the hinge holes, hold the gap seal to one side, get something pointy, and then just feel along. You can usually see the holes exposed through the cloth, but otherwise just feel sideways with something semi-blunt till it falls into a dip. Poke the holes, and each hinge has 3 holes, and a pair of hinges 6 holes. They're at slightly different spacings depending on which surface it is. Once you've exposed all the holes on all your control surfaces, next procedure is to burn the fabric out of those holes, because the rivets won't fit neatly in unless the fabric is actually cleared completely out of the hole. For that purpose, I'm using a porta-gas torch. And I'm using a piece of steel, 3/16 in diameter, same size as this one here is actually smaller, 532. It has a taper, but you can use a nail, a 3-inch nail, use any piece of steel. And we heat the whole steel up. Until it is quite hot, and you can usually do about 6 holes with the residual temperature. Now that's red hot. 1, 2, 3, running out of heat. Alright, so all the holes are burnt in this area. Naturally I'd carry on and burn all the holes out on every control surface. The next procedure is to clear the gap seal away from those 3 holes, because the hinges will clash with the gap seal. Now I just cut that with a hot knife, but you can actually run a Stanley blade through it if you want, or it's better if you can get run a Stanley blade through and then put a knife just to seal the edges, but you mustn't cut the stitching if you can help it. You probably will cut the stitching when you burn the holes out, that's okay, it won't hurt, but try not to cut too much of the stitching as you can let the seam off. So cutting now the gap seal to give clearance, and staying approximately 2 millimeters above the stitch, so there's a little flap there. I'm not trying to make it dead flush, and I'm going around about 10 millimeters to 12 millimeters past the outer ends of each hole. Now that will allow this flap area here to be able to be moved to either side, and the piece of cloth here can move to one side too when the hinge goes on. And that hinging, once the slots are burnt and the hinge holes are burnt, then the next procedure will be actually hinging the tail, and we'll carry on with that in a sec. As discussed before, burning holes for the hinges, you will also need to burn the holes for the wire attachment points and any bolt holes. Now the fin has the most holes, and it has 2 big quarter holes on the side there, and 2 3/16 holes up further. That's for the brace wires to connect later on. On the end of each control surface you will need to drill 5 holes. Now they're fabric securing holes, they don't have to be exact, but they have to be in 5 locations. Don't go too close to the end, try to start in approximately 25 mil in from the end. Those rivets will be aluminium rivets, all aluminium, because all they are is securing the fabric as a backup to the glue. And it's always best to use an air rivet gun. Can use a hand gun, but it's hard work with stainless steel rivets. These are aluminium, these pop off easily. So we rivet fabric on the end, on every control surface, at 5 locations. Then we place the hinges in position. The hinges on the fin and the horizontal stabiliser will have a spacing between them, and try to keep that spacing pushed apart with your fingers. Don't squeeze them together and close that gap up, because once it's riveted off, it'll make it difficult for the other hinge to fit between the gap. So the ones with the gap, keep the gap prised apart, and on the elevator and rudder they will be together. Keep them hard together so that so they'll fit in very easy. You put all the rivets in, don't just put one rivet in and then bang it off. You must have all the rivets in and have both hinges in position. The reason being, you want to keep the alignment, and they do tend to lean one way and the other, so you actually have to hold them apart and hold them vertical, because there might be 2 layers of cloth on one side of the hinge and one on the other. The hinge will naturally tilt up, so you have to physically hold them in position, and when you're riveting you have to lean the rivet gun towards the side that has the extra fabric so that the hinge pulls down correctly. Always pull the centre hole of the hinge, followed by the one closest to the pivot point, followed by the outer one. So always holding them apart, keeping them square by the lean of the rivet gun. Pull the centre rivet, pull the inner rivet, pull the outer rivet. The thing is, if you pull the outer rivet first, it tends to make the hinge go uphill and then it doesn't come down correctly. So we always pull the centre one. That helps to pull it in, and control the lean of the hinge. Centre, inner one, outer one. Now there may be a little bit of misalignment, hopefully not too much, and you can use a nail or something just to flex the hinges into alignment. You may have to twist them just a little bit. So that's the hinging procedure. There's 96 rivets in the tail hinges, and they're all stainless steel. You must use stainless steel on the hinges because it's structural, and all aluminium rivets for the fabric close off on the end of each control surface. And that's the hinging section. Next stage is fitting the elevator horns. Now the horns must be placed into the end of the leading edge, and you must align the centre of the tube on the horn with the hinges. When you're happy with that alignment, you drill a hole in the riveting securing point on the back of the horn, and that goes in for 6/4 stainless steel rivet. But you must have the alignment correct. This must be on the centre line before you drill and rivet the back point here. And once that has been done, then bang the rivet off there, then the horn cannot rotate, and then you drill the hole through the chrome moly. This one is already bolted up, but you drill the hole through the chrome moly. The hole will already be in the elevator, but you have to drill the hole through the chrome moly horn and then place the bolt in position. So you rivet that first, keeping the alignment down there, then you rivet the horn, and then you bolt the horn. If you bolt this up first, then this can be out of alignment, which then puts the join up link out of alignment, and your elevators won't fit very well. This is sail testing. This aircraft has just flown in only a few minutes ago. It's a red and white sail, and looking down the wing you can see a couple of holes that we've already punched in the sail. Now with sail testing, you need to test at the trailing edge normally, because the leading edge is under more strain, and if you burst it in the leading edge, it'll probably put you out of commission for flying. But this sail is quite rotten, and to show you, with just one thumb, we're going to press down on the side of the batten, and it was only very light pressure. It wasn't like it was a punch which would go straight through into the white panel. The white is also rotten, and that pressure can be done with 2 flat fingers as well, and it's just pushing lightly and bang, the whole panel bursts. Hence you don't test it on the leading edge, because what usually happens is it bursts fairly long, and if you think your sail is rotten, you should test it at the rear, and we'll test it there now and show you what it's like testing at the rear. Okay, we're on the trailing edge near one of the battens, usually about 2 inches in from the trailing edge. Push with your thumb, and my thumb went through and created a split around about 2 inches long. I'll do another one, and I'm not trying to push sharp, I just push a little bit of pressure. I'm not putting my whole body weight on it. Now this is a bad sail, so it's splitting quite easily, and he has had a little bit of damage here on the top from a wire from another aircraft, and it's put a whole lot of tears right across the top, which, as you can see, I can just easily split the sail, or even with 4 fingers, just straight through a panel. Now this is the aileron, coming up to the aileron. Now you notice with the aileron, I'm pushing as hard as I can, and then I got it to go through. It's rotten too, but control surfaces don't usually take the tension that the main wing does. Now, going underneath the wing, the cloth doesn't fade under the wing, and there's no way that I can push my thumb through the sail. Now, even if I punch it, and even if I got a hammer, and you can see a big indentation in the cloth, it won't damage the cloth. So if it's good cloth, you won't put a hole in it, but if it's bad cloth, like here, then you only have to touch lightly and bang, instant holes. Now I've come to another aircraft here. This sail was fitted 14 months ago, has done 120 hours of flying time. The sail, so 14 months old, has been UV treated with 303 treatment, but a good sail will actually take quite a bit of pressure. There's no problems, you will not put it through. Now a sail should last another 6 years, 5 years, but it could go downhill in 6 months if it was parked in strong sun every day. Now we're on the tailplane here, and this tailplane's got a repair tapes on it, and I just pushed a rip in it. So looking again, yeah, just light pressure, and you'll notice that it rips very readily. Yeah, definitely rotten. On the fin I cannot push my thumb through. I can indent fairly hard, and the reason being is that it's vertical to the sunlight, and it doesn't get the direct light downwards on the cloth. So, but the horizontal stabilizer's there in direct downlight, and pushing there, a little bit more pressure in one spot, and the sail's just rotted there, just breaks quite easily. So that's how you do the sail test. And we've got the elevator here, there's a tear there, done on a finger test, and once again, just we'll hold it up and just downward pressure on the thumb, and bang. Like I say, if you can usually push quite hard, but sometimes it breaks, sometimes it doesn't, but most of the time, after the ends has been glued, first off, we get an iron, make sure it's not too hot, make sure it's adjusted well. Then we just iron the wrinkles out of the section you've glued carefully, getting any slack sections out. over. Just so the fabric will sit down nicely. So all the any air bubbles that you have underneath the glue should disappear and the fabric should sit down nice and flat. You can get most wrinkles out, but sometimes it's a bit difficult to get full wrinkles out. Okay, so it's all ironed down, ready for the next stage gluing. Now we're ready to glue. Just check our brush, and we've got a polytack glue here with a small amount of MEK or acetone in it. You slap the glue on everywhere that we want the fabric to contact. We don't thin it out too much, otherwise you won't have enough glue there for good contact. So place it on fairly wet. And being a warm day, this glue should dry very fast. I put the brush back in the MEK, otherwise the glue will dry on the brush very quickly. I'll flip back to this side. Just pull the fabric into position, make sure that there's no major wrinkles. Don't have to have it excessively tight, but you have to make sure there's no wrinkles in it. Now with the brush, out of the MEK, with a little bit of glue mixed in the MEK as well, we're just wetting up the fabric again, and the MEK or acetone is going through and releasing the glue on the back side and locking the fabric off. I'm just pushing the glue through there, and to help the drying process, like before, you can use a clean rag and just wrap the fabric around, making sure that it all sits down and any wrinkles are pushed out. So it's drying fairly fast here. Just get this fabric down nice and tight here. And once again with the rag, push the glue through the fabric, make sure it penetrates and locks the fabric up. When it feels dry to the hand, well, that's when it's dry. If it's feeling wet, you can help it to dry by just rubbing it a little bit with the rag. And that's all stuck there now, and we'll get ready for the next side. Now, next stage is the finish flap. We mark the contact area on the other side of the tube. You don't want to go past where the fabric's not going to pull tight. You don't want to glue the fabric up onto the fabric in mid-space. So just going to mark